The winter of that year was not merely a season, it was a siege. The city, usually a vibrant tapestry of noise and motion, had been beaten into submission by a relentless, howling wind that swept down from the north, carrying with it shards of ice that felt less like snow and more like pulverized glass. The sky above was a bruised purple, heavy and low, pressing down on the rooftops as if trying to crush the buildings beneath its weight. In the labyrinth of alleyways that made up the poorest district of the city, the cold was a physical presence, a predator that stalked the doorways and cracked windows, waiting for the fire to die out, waiting for the blankets to thin. 12-year-old Marcus walked through this frozen purgatory, his body angled sharply against the wind, fighting for every inch of forward progress. He was a small figure against the gray backdrop of the city, his silhouette ragged and trembling. His coat, a dark, oversized wool garment that he had found in a donation bin 2 years ago, was now more holes than fabric. The lining hung in tatters, flapping uselessly against his legs, and the wind found every tear, every loose seam, sliding its icy fingers against his skin, seeking the warmth of his blood. Marcus's hands were shoved deep into pockets that offered no refuge, his fingers curled into tight, painful balls. He could no longer feel his toes. His sneakers, cheap canvas things held together by duct tape and hope, were soaked through with freezing slush. He had stuffed newspaper into them that morning, the sports section of a discarded daily, but the paper had long since turned to a wet pulp that only served to hold the cold against his skin. But as agonizing as the cold was, it was a distant second to the monster clawing at his insides. Hunger. It was a living thing, a sharp, twisting parasite that lived in his gut. It had been 2 days since his last real meal, a half-eaten sandwich he had shared with his mother. Since then, there had been nothing but tap water and the gnawing, empty ache that made his head spin and his vision blur at the edges. Yet, Marcus did not stop. He could not stop. The image of his mother, Clara, burned in his mind, driving him forward when his legs wanted to buckle. She was lying in their basement apartment, a damp, windowless room that smelled of mildew and sickness. For weeks she had been fighting what the local clinic called a severe respiratory infection, a polite way of saying that poverty and cold were slowly killing her. That morning her skin had been burning to the touch, her breath coming in shallow, rattling gasps that sounded like dry leaves scraping across pavement. She needed medicine, she needed a doctor. But more than anything, right now, she needed food. Her body was too weak to fight the fever. She was fading, dissolving into the shadows of that cold room, and Marcus was the only thing tethering her to this world. The weight of that responsibility was heavier than the snow, heavier than the sky. He was just a boy, but fate had drafted him into a war for survival where the odds were stacked impossibly against him. He turned the corner onto Fifth Avenue, the invisible border between his world of shadows and the world of light. Here the street lamps were functional, casting golden pools of illumination on the freshly shoveled sidewalks. Here people walked with purpose, wrapped in expensive down coats and leather gloves, their breath steaming in the air as they chatted about dinner reservations and holiday plans. They looked through Marcus as if he were a ghost, a smudge on the pristine landscape of their evening. He kept his head down, his eyes fixed on the slushy pavement, until the smell hit him.
It was a scent so rich, so complex and warm, that it almost brought him to his knees. Yeast, caramelized sugar, roasted nuts, warm butter. It was the smell of life itself. He looked up and saw it. Arthur's Bakery. The storefront was a beacon of amber light in the deepening twilight. The large plate-glass window was framed with festive garlands, and through the condensation Marcus could see a display that looked like something out of a fairy tale. Mountains of golden croissants, loaves of sourdough with perfectly blistered crusts, trays of cinnamon rolls drowning in cream cheese frosting, and baguettes standing like soldiers in wicker baskets. Marcus drifted toward the window like a moth to a flame. He pressed his face near the glass, feeling the heat radiating from within. Inside, it was a different universe. The walls were painted a warm cream color, the floors were polished wood, and the air seemed to shimmer with comfort. He saw customers pointing at pastries, laughing, handing over cash and credit cards with casual indifference. He watched a woman buy a box of eclairs that probably cost more than his mother's rent for the month. She didn't look hungry. She looked bored. A surge of anger, hot and sudden, flared in Marcus's chest, mixing with the shame and the hunger. Why? Why did they get to be warm? Why did they get to eat until they were full, while his mother lay dying on a mattress on the floor? The unfairness of it choked him. He looked at his reflection in the glass. A gaunt, wide-eyed boy with dark skin turning ashen from the cold, hair matted under a hood, eyes reflecting a desperate, feral hunger. He didn't want to be a thief. His mother had raised him on Bible verses and strict moral codes. "We work for what we get, Marcus," she would whisper. "Integrity is the only thing the poor man owns that the rich man can't buy." But integrity wouldn't lower a fever. Integrity wouldn't fill a stomach. Marcus stepped back from the window, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. He looked up and down the street. The flow of pedestrians had thinned. The bakery was busy, but chaotic. He could see the owner, a massive man with a shock of white hair and a mustache that looked like a snowdrift, arguing with a delivery driver near the back. The counter was momentarily unattended. It was now or never. The decision wasn't made by his brain, it was made by his survival instinct. He pushed the heavy door open. The bell above chimed, a bright, cheerful sound that felt like a scream to Marcus's heightened senses. The wall of heat that hit him was instant and overwhelming, carrying the smell of baking dough so strongly it made him dizzy. He kept his head down, pulling his hood lower, trying to shrink inside his oversized coat. He moved quickly, not toward the register, but toward a rustic wooden rack near the door where fresh loaves of country bread were cooling. They were huge, dusted with flour, the crusts thick and dark. He reached out, his hand trembling violently. His fingers brushed the rough, warm surface of the bread. It felt like holding a living thing. He grabbed the nearest loaf, its heat seeping instantly into his frozen palm. In one fluid, panicked motion, he shoved the bread inside his coat, pressing it against his chest, zipped the coat halfway up, and turned to leave. His heart was beating so hard he was sure everyone in the room could hear it. Just walk, he told himself. Just walk out the door and run. He took 1 step, 2 steps. His hand was on the brass handle of the door. He was going to make it. "Stop!"
The word was not shouted. It was spoken with a deep, resonant baritone that cut through the murmur of the shop like a knife through soft butter. It wasn't a question, it was a command that carried the weight of absolute authority. Marcus froze. His entire body went rigid. The silence that descended on the bakery was instantaneous and suffocating. Every conversation stopped. Every coffee cup paused halfway to a mouth. Marcus squeezed his eyes shut, wishing he could dissolve, wishing he could turn into smoke and drift away. Tears, hot and stinging, pricked at his eyelids. He slowly turned around. The massive man, the owner, was standing at the end of the counter. He wasn't looking at the delivery driver anymore. He was looking directly at Marcus. His eyes, the color of steel, were unreadable, nestled beneath bushy white brows. He wiped his large, flour-dusted hands on his apron and walked slowly around the counter. He moved with the heavy, deliberate grace of a bear. The crowd parted for him. He stopped 3 feet from Marcus. Up close, he was terrifying. He smelled of yeast and Old Spice. "Open the coat," the man said. His voice was low, calm, but hard as granite. Marcus's hands shook so badly he couldn't find the zipper tab at first. He fumbled, a sob escaping his throat, a small, pathetic sound in the quiet room. Finally, he pulled the zipper down. The loaf of bread was there, pressed against his ragged, stained t-shirt, slightly crushed from his grip. The crust was cracked. He had ruined it. I'm sorry," Marcus whispered, his voice barely audible. "I'm so sorry." The baker looked at the bread. Then he looked at Marcus's face. He looked at the cracked lips, the hollowed cheeks, the way the boy was vibrating with cold and terror. He looked down at the wet, ruined sneakers. "You steal from me?" the baker asked. "I wake up at 3 in the morning to make this. I need the dough with these hands, and you think you can just walk in and take it?" "My mom," Marcus choked out, the dam breaking. "Please, sir, my mom is sick. She's dying. She hasn't eaten. I didn't do it for me. I swear. I'll put it back. No, I can't put it back. I touched it. I'll work. I'll do anything. Please don't call the police. If they take me, she'll be all alone. She'll die all alone." The customers were whispering now. "Call the cops," a man in a suit muttered. "Can't have street rats robbing the place." "Poor kid," a woman whispered back. The baker, whose name was Arthur, ignored them all. He stared at Marcus for a long, agonizing moment. Arthur had seen many things in his 60 years. He had seen the city change. He had seen businesses rise and fall. He had buried a wife and a son years ago, a loss that had hollowed him out and left him with nothing but flour and ovens to fill the void. He had become hard, solitary, focused only on the perfection of his craft. But as he looked at this trembling boy, he saw something that cracked the ice around his heart. He saw a fierce, terrified love. He saw a boy who wasn't stealing for greed, but for survival. He saw a reflection of the son he had lost, a boy who would never grow up to be 12. Arthur took a deep breath. His face softened just a fraction. He turned to the crowd. "Show's over," he rumbled. "Everyone back to your pastries. Nothing to see here." Then he reached out. Marcus flinched, expecting a strike. Instead, Arthur's hand, warm and rough like sandpaper, gently gripped his shoulder. "Come with me," Arthur said. He guided Marcus not to the door, but to the back of the shop, through the swinging double doors that led to the kitchen. The noise of the shop faded, replaced by the rhythmic hum of industrial mixers and the blast of heat from the deck ovens. It was a cathedral of baking. Arthur steered Marcus to a small wooden cable in the corner, near a stack of flour sacks. "Sit," he ordered. Marcus sat on a stool, his legs dangling, still clutching the crushed loaf of bread. Arthur took the bread from him gently and set it aside. "That one's cold," Arthur muttered. "Wait here." Marcus watched wide-eyed as the giant man moved around the kitchen. Arthur grabbed a ladle and dipped it into a large pot simmering on a burner in the back. He filled a large ceramic bowl with thick, hearty beef stew, loaded with carrots and potatoes. He cut 2 thick slices of fresh, still steaming loaf of sourdough. He poured a glass of warm milk. He placed the feast on the table in front of Marcus. "Eat," Arthur said, crossing his massive arms over his chest. Marcus stared at the food,
The smell was intoxicating. His stomach gave a loud, painful growl. But he didn't pick up the spoon. He looked up at Arthur, tears streaming down his face. Is this a trick?" he asked. "Are the police coming while I eat?" Arthur sighed, pulling up a metal chair and sitting opposite the boy. The chair creaked under his weight. "No police, son. No trick. Just food. You said you were hungry. Eat." Marcus picked up the spoon. His hand was shaking so much he spilled some stew on the table. He took the first bite. The flavor exploded in his mouth. Salty, savory, warm. It was the best thing he had ever tasted. He ate quickly, desperately, shoving bread into his mouth, drinking the milk in gulps. But halfway through the bowl, he stopped. He put the spoon down. He looked at the remaining bread, then at Arthur. "My mom," Marcus whispered. "She needs this more than I do. Can I take the rest to her?" Arthur felt a stinging sensation in his eyes. He cleared his throat loudly to hide the emotion. This boy, starving and freezing, was willing to stop eating to save his mother. "Finish your bowl, son. No trick, just food. You said you were hungry. Eat." Marcus picked up the spoon. His hand was shaking so much he spilled some stew on the table. He took the first bite. The flavor exploded in his mouth. Salty, savory, warm. It was the best thing he had ever tasted. He ate quickly, desperately, shoving bread into his mouth, drinking the milk in gulps. But halfway through the bowl, he stopped. He put the spoon down. He looked at the remaining bread, then at Arthur. "My mom," Marcus whispered. "She needs this more than I do. Can I take the rest to her?" Arthur felt a stinging sensation in his eyes. He cleared his throat loudly to hide the emotion. This boy, starving and freezing, was willing to stop eating to save his mother. "Finish your bowl," Arthur said, his voice gruff but kind. "We'll pack fresh food for your mother. You're not taking her leftovers." Marcus's eyes widened. You mean it?" "I never say things I don't mean," Arthur replied. "Finish up. Then we're going for a walk." 10 minutes later, the shop was left in the care of the assistant manager. Arthur emerged from the back carrying a large cardboard box. Inside, he had packed 2 loaves of bread, a container of the stew, a box of herbal tea, a jar of honey, and a dozen muffins. He also carried a heavy woolen blanket that he kept in his office for late nights. He handed the box to Marcus, but seeing the boy buckle slightly under the weight, he took it back. "I'll carry the box," Arthur said. "You just lead the way." They walked out into the cold, but this time the wind didn't feel quite as deadly to Marcus. He had food, he had help. He led Arthur through the winding streets, past the flickering streetlights, into the darker, broken part of the city. They arrived at the tenement building. The front door was broken, hanging off its hinges. The stairwell smelled of urine and damp rot. Arthur didn't flinch. He just climbed the stairs, his breathing steady. When they entered the apartment, Arthur stopped. The poverty was stark. There was no furniture, just a few crates and the mattress on the floor. The air inside was freezing. Clara lay under a pile of rags, shivering violently. She looked skeletal. Arthur set the box down on a crate and knelt beside her. He wasn't a doctor, but he knew sickness when he saw it. "Ma'am?" he said softly. Clara opened her eyes, glassy and unfocused. "Marcus? Who is this?" "This is Mr. Arthur, Mom. He brought us dinner. He's a friend." Arthur stood up. "Marcus, she needs more than food," he said seriously. "She needs a hospital. Now." Marcus panicked. "We can't. We don't have insurance. They won't take us." Arthur pulled out his phone. "I'm not asking them. I'm telling them." He made a call, his voice low and urgent. He called a private clinic he supported, calling in a favor he had saved for a rainy day. Within 20 minutes, a private ambulance arrived. No sirens, just efficient professionals who wrapped Clara in thermal blankets and loaded her onto a stretcher. Arthur rode with them. He sat in the waiting room with Marcus for 6 hours. He bought the boy hot chocolate from the vending machine. He told him stories about bread, how the yeast is a living organism, how it needs warmth to grow, just like people. He distracted the boy from the terror of the moment. Finally, the doctor came out. "She's stable," he said. "Pneumonia. Severe, but treatable. A few days of antibiotics, fluids, and rest, and she'll be fine. But she can't go back to that cold apartment." Arthur nodded. "She won't," he said firmly. When Marcus was allowed to see his mother, she was sleeping peacefully, hooked up to an IV, her breathing steady for the first time in weeks. Marcus kissed her forehead and walked back out to the hallway where Arthur was waiting. He stood in front of the baker, feeling very small. "Mr. Arthur," he said, "I don't know how to thank you. I'll pay you back. It might take 100 years, but I'll pay back every cent." Arthur looked down at the boy. He saw the determination in his jaw. "You're right," Arthur said. "You will pay me back, but not with money." Marcus looked confused. "How?" "You stole from me, Marcus," Arthur said, his voice stern again. "That is a debt, and you will work it off. Starting Monday, you come to the bakery every day after school. You will sweep the floors. You will scrub the pans. You will take out the trash. You will work until your arms ache. And in exchange, I will give you a fair wage, and I will teach you a trade. You will never have to steal again, because you will have a skill in your hands that no one can take away from you. Do we have a deal?" Marcus felt a surge of hope so strong it almost knocked the wind out of him. It wasn't just a job, it was a lifeline. It was a future. He stood up straight, wiping his eyes. "Deal," he said. "I'll be the hardest worker you've ever seen." And he was. The story could have ended there, a single act of kindness on a cold night. But life is written in chapters, and this was only the prologue. Marcus showed up on Monday. He swept the floors until the wood gleamed. He scrubbed the blackened baking sheets until he could see his face in them. He didn't complain. He didn't slack off. For the first 6 months, Arthur barely let him touch the dough. He watched him, tested him. He wanted to see if he had discipline. Marcus proved he did. He absorbed the rhythm of the bakery. He learned to tell when the bread was done just by the smell. He learned the sound of a perfect crust cracking as it cooled. One afternoon, while the shop was quiet, Arthur called Marcus to the main workbench. "Wash your hands, again, with hot water." Marcus obeyed. When he returned, Arthur placed a mound of soft white dough in front of him. Bread is simple. Flour, water, salt, yeast. But making it good, that takes soul. You have to feel it. He placed his large hands over Marcus's small ones, guiding him in the kneading motion. Push, turn, fold. Push, turn, fold. You are waking up the gluten. You are giving it structure. That afternoon, Marcus baked his first loaf. It was slightly lopsided and a bit burnt on the bottom, but when Arthur tore a piece off and ate it, he nodded. "It's edible," he grunted. For Arthur, that was high praise. Years began to blur together, marked not by calendars, but by the seasons of the bakery. There were the frantic rushes of Thanksgiving, where they worked 30 hours straight making pumpkin pies. There were the slow, humid summer afternoons where the dough rose too fast. There were the cold winter mornings where the ovens were the only comfort in the world. Marcus grew up in that kitchen. His shoulders broadened, filling out the chef's whites that Arthur had bought him. His hands became strong and dusted permanently with flour. He finished high school with honors, studying textbooks on the flour sacks in the back room. Clara recovered fully and became the heart of the front of house. She managed the register, charmed the customers, and kept Arthur's grumpy temper in check. The three of them became a strange, cobbled-together family. Arthur, the lonely old man, found a daughter in Clara and a son in Marcus. The bakery, once a place of business, became a home. But time is a thief that even the kindest hearts cannot escape. As Marcus entered his mid-20s, Arthur began to slow down. The heavy sacks of flour became too much for him to lift. His hands, once steady as rocks, began to tremble with arthritis. He spent more time in his office and less time at the ovens, leaving the baking to Marcus. The customers noticed the change, but they didn't mind, because Marcus had learned from the master. In fact, some whispered that the student had surpassed the teacher. Marcus introduced new recipes, spiced breads from his heritage, intricate pastries he had read about. But he always kept Arthur's original sourdough recipe exactly the same, out of respect. One rainy Tuesday in November, exactly 15 years after the day Marcus had first walked into the shop, Arthur called him into the office. The old man was sitting in his leather chair, looking smaller than he used to. His breathing was a bit labored. On the desk sat a thick envelope and a set of brass keys. "Sit down, son," Arthur said. Marcus sat, wiping his hands on his apron. "Is everything okay, boss? We need to order more rye flour for tomorrow." Arthur smiled, a sad, wistful smile. "The rye can wait. We need to talk about the future." He pushed the keys across the mahogany desk. "I'm tired, Marcus. My bones are old. This bakery needs young blood. It needs fire. It needs you."
Marcus stared at the keys. He recognized them instantly. They were the master keys to the shop, the safe, and the deed box. "Arthur, what are you saying?" "I'm retiring," Arthur said softly. "I'm signing the bakery over to you. All of it. The building, the equipment, the brand. It's yours." Marcus felt the room spin. "I can't take this. This is your life's work. It's worth millions. I can't pay you for this." Arthur chuckled, a dry, raspy sound. "Pay me? Marcus, look at me." He leaned forward, his steel-gray eyes locking on to Marcus's dark ones. 15 years ago, a starving boy walked into my shop, willing to sacrifice his own freedom to save his mother. That boy gave me more than money ever could. He gave me a purpose. He gave me a family. You saved me from dying a bitter, lonely old man. This isn't a gift. It's an inheritance. You earned every brick of this place." Tears welled up in Marcus's eyes, hot and fast, just like they had on that freezing night so long ago. He stood up and walked around the desk, embracing the old man. Arthur hugged him back, his grip frail but full of love. "Thank you, Dad," Marcus whispered. It was the first time he had called him that. Arthur squeezed his eyes shut, a single tear losing itself in his white beard. The transition was seamless. The sign out front was changed to Arthur and Marcus, Artisan Bakery. The grand reopening was the talk of the city. The mayor came, the press came, the lines stretched around the block. Marcus stood on a makeshift stage in front of the shop. Wearing his pristine white chef's coat, he looked out at the crowd. He saw his mother, Clara, radiant and healthy, handing out samples. He saw Arthur, sitting in a wheelchair now, wrapped in a blanket, beaming with pride. He saw the faces of the community, rich and poor, young and old. He stepped up to the microphone, his hand resting on a large basket of fresh bread. "Welcome," Marcus began, his voice strong and clear, carrying over the autumn wind. "Many of you know this bakery for our sourdough or our croissants. But today, I want to tell you the real recipe behind this place." The crowd went silent. 15 years ago, I was a thief. I stood right there, he pointed to the spot near the door, freezing, starving, and desperate. I stole a loaf of bread because my mother was dying. I expected judgment. I expected punishment. Instead, the man sitting right there, he pointed to Arthur, and the crowd erupted in applause. He gave me mercy. He didn't see a criminal. He saw a child in pain. He fed me. He saved my mother. He gave me a job, a trade, and a life. Marcus paused, fighting to keep his voice steady. Mercy is a powerful ingredient. It rises like yeast. It expands. It fills the empty spaces. Because of Arthur's kindness, I am standing here today. Because of his kindness, my mother is alive. And so today I am making a promise. As long as I own this bakery, no one who is hungry will ever be turned away. If you have no money, you can pay with a smile. You can pay with a handshake. But you will eat. Because bread isn't just food. It's a symbol. It means you are safe. It means you are not alone. He reached into the basket and pulled out a warm loaf of bread. He walked off the stage and went straight to the edge of the crowd where a homeless man was standing, watching shyly. The man looked a lot like Marcus had 15 years ago. Ragged coat, tired eyes. Marcus smiled and handed him the bread. It's fresh, on the house. The cheers that rang out that day were louder than the wind, warmer than the ovens. Marcus looked back at Arthur. The old man gave him a thumbs up, his eyes shining. In that moment, Marcus understood the true secret of baking. It wasn't the flour. It wasn't the water. It was the warmth. The warmth of the oven, yes, but more importantly, the warmth of the human heart. The cold wind still blew through the city streets, but inside the bakery and inside the hearts of everyone who heard the story, it was summer. The cycle of kindness had been completed and a new one had begun, destined to rise and feed the souls of the city for generations to come. The boy who stole bread had become the man who gave it away, and in doing so, he had found the richest treasure of all.